Hey guys, I'm Colin Wright, and I am going to answer some questions from the audience. Let's see, first question is one that I hear pretty frequently, I think. This time it came from Twitter, though. How can you afford to travel all the time? It's a fair question. And for those of you who don't know, I travel full-time. Typically, I move to a new country every 4 months, and my readers vote on what country I move to. And then I go there and I rent a home, and I live as much like a local as possible. So how do I make this work? First and foremost, I make money. I earn money. I make my living primarily off of my books that I sell. I'm an author and I've written a few dozen books, fiction and nonfiction, and so people buy those, thankfully. So I'm able to make a living off of that. I also do speaking gigs from time to time, and so sometimes I make money from those as well. And then anytime I do anything that exposes me at all, there's a chance that will lead people back to my books, and that helps propagate the lifestyle that I live. The other side of this coin, so that's the making money side. The other side is that I don't spend a lot of money. I don't live some big glamorous lifestyle in the sense of like a Las Vegas hotel. Maybe it's slightly glamorous in that people perceive travel as glamorous, but for me, when I go and live in these countries, I'm not staying at a big fancy hotel, I'm not staying at a mansion, I'm not eating out at a big fancy restaurant every night. I'm living like a local. I'm renting an apartment, I'm going to the grocery store, I'm walking a lot, I'm writing a lot, I'm meeting people, I'm doing the things that I would do at home, just in another country. And then in doing so, I'm learning about the culture, developing relationships. I'm basically learning about the culture by living in the culture. And so that lifestyle really isn't very expensive. And usually, depending on where I live, my entire lifestyle costs less than my rent in LA used to cost. And so it's really relatively inexpensive, which is great because as an author, you are not rolling in dough, typically. But this is why one of the most common pieces of advice I give to people is to live like a local when possible. Because when you travel, it doesn't have to be some big event. It doesn't have to be a big, crazy, expensive thing where you're just throwing cash at everything and living like there's no tomorrow. You don't have to wait for some big event to travel. You don't have to wait for your honeymoon or some holiday. You can travel all the time if you do it the right way. And live like a local, eat what the locals eat, live where the locals live. If you stay away from the tourist traps, things tend to be like half the cost of what you expect them to be. And typically you get, I don't want to say a more legitimate experience because there's no illegitimate experience. The tourism track is legitimate just in a different way. But you get an experience that's more accurate to how people actually live in these places. If you go to Prague and you only go to Old Town, you get to see what the party part of Prague looks like, but you don't see where people actually live. And so for me, I tend to live in places outside of the tourism industry and away from places where the only relationships that you'll find are predicated on people trying to sell you something. Here's another travel-related question. Are there any traits that you find are helpful to have if you want to make travel a big part of your life? Yeah, it helps to have a passion. It helps to be passionate about something that you're doing, maybe your work or some other aspect of your lifestyle that doesn't fall within the realm of like what alcohol brands are trying to pitch as an ideal lifestyle. So if your entire lifestyle is predicated on going out clubbing and spending a lot of time in like stretch Hummers, then yeah, you're gonna pay out the ass anytime you travel anywhere. But if you're like me and your lifestyle is oriented around the work that you do and reading books and writing things and meeting people and walking around and looking at things, then it's relatively inexpensive and you can get a lot from every experience without having to shell out a lot of dough. And that helps you continue to travel because you don't have to work like crazy to earn enough money to spend it on stretch Hummers and such. It also helps to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And this works doubly in this case because you're going to be uncomfortable in new cultures because they will have very different beliefs and very different practices and lifestyles. They may not have that thing that you always eat for breakfast as a habit, and if you can't get comfortable changing your habits or changing your rituals or changing the way that you view the world temporarily, then it's going to be quite distressing rather than interesting. But it's also important to be able to be uncomfortable because you'll be cramming yourself into little airplane seats and riding on camels, and you'll be exposed to all kinds of new and exciting diseases. And so you have to be okay with all of that. You have to look at travel and say, hey, this is totally worth it. You know, being crammed into this tiny little seat and it being noisy like crazy around me all the time, that's part of the joy of this situation, rather than it being a constant downside. And then there's two other things that seem to be at odds, but they're not really. One is to be capable of being gregarious and being very social. And this allows you to go out and meet people and find assistance when you need it. And it allows you to really extract more out of every situation than you would otherwise. You can go to a place and just follow your little travel guide and learn something, but you won't learn a lot more than you would have just reading the travel guide. Whereas if you meet people, if you talk to locals, and if you're actually genuinely curious about what they have to say, then you'll learn things that nobody could possibly write down, because they wouldn't have thought to ask that, and because you have to have been there talking to this one person to have learned it. The flip side is that you need to be comfortable being alone. Because even though you'll be in public all the time, you'll be in very big public places like train stations and airports, and you'll be around people potentially all the time, even while traveling through great big cities or whatnot, you will also be anonymous in a lot of ways, particularly if there's a language barrier, but even just because you don't belong there and you don't have friends there, you have no existing relationships. And so being comfortable being up here and being able to entertain yourself on a 13-hour plane ride and being able to find interesting, fulfilling relationships that may not last forever, being able to find joy in the temporal things, that's something that will get you through a lot of difficult situations and will allow you to grow as an individual as you grow your knowledge and experience with the world. If you enjoyed this video, a like or a subscribe or a share would be amazing. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in a future video, you can ask it in the comment section below. You can find me elsewhere on the internet at Colin is my name, and my website where you can find my books and information about the other stuff that I'm up to is colin.io.